Greetings.
Hey, good evening. So we're just waiting a few more minutes to start the meeting.
Perfect. We can't hear anything here on the WebEx.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
That's because I had my microphone off. And unlike our prior meetings, those of you who are here in person have individual control with the mics. It helps if for you to hear, and with the interference if you don't have it on when you're not speaking. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Call the City of Homestead Ad-Hoc Charter Review Committee meeting to order. Today is Monday, April 26th, 2021, and it is 5:33 p.m. Let me read the COVID statement into the record. Pursuant to City of Homestead COVID-19 local state of emergency and executive order for hybrid and virtual public meetings dated November 20th, 2020, this will be a hybrid Charter Review Committee meeting in accordance with authorized communications, media technology, and protocols as provided on the city's website and the meeting agendas. This hybrid meeting allows for the public to participate live during the hybrid meeting by calling in, appearing through Cisco WebEx, or physically appearing. Please note that due to COVID-19, there will be limited occupancy available in the council chambers. Face coverings must be worn by attendees at all times. In addition, the public will be subject to temperature checks and COVID screenings will be required. The hybrid meeting can also be viewed live on the city's website at cityofhomestead.com. The city will be accepting public comments as part of the hybrid meeting, which can be emailed to publiccomments@cityofhomestead.com. Public comments are limited to 300 words per comment and will be made part of the record and included in the minutes. Public comments can be submitted 24 hours prior to the Ad Hoc Charter Review Committee meeting. Further details and instructions concerning public participation in the hybrid meeting are referenced in the City of Homestead Virtual Meetings Quick Start Guide located on the city's website. You call the roll, Madam Clerk?
Mayor Stephen D. Lossner,
Here.
John Moss,
Mr. Moss is absent.
Stephen Booker, Les Burke, Timothy Gregg,
Greg, here.
Julio Guzman,
Here.
Elvis Maldonado, Chandra Mallory.
Here.
Thank you, and we do have a quorum present in the chambers. Mr. Moss intended to be here. He texted me just a little while ago and indicated that he had come down with something. He totally lost his voice, and he apologized for not being able to attend today. If we turn on our computer screens, we'll be able to see. There we go. There we go. All right. Your blue light's not on. All right. Very good. First, let's deviate a little bit and let's have the minutes of our last meeting from nearly a year ago, June 29th, 2020, are before us. Do we have a motion for approval of those minutes?
Mr. Mayor,
Craig.
I always want to commend Ms. Sewell and her staff for the excellent job they do with the meetings. I'm afraid that at one point in my previous life, I was a grammarian, so I just have two minor corrections. Under the comments on the second line, it said the city has accepting, it's either is accepting or has accepted. And then under number 2, next to the last line, it says the minutes as corrected were unanimously approved, not was.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. So is that the form of a motion to approve as corrected?
I move that the minutes as corrected be approved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
I second the motion.
Thank you, Ms. Mallory. All right, all in favor? Aye. Are there any nays? All right, thank you. Well, again, it's good to see most all of you in person again, and for those online, thank you for being here. It's been a while since we've all been in this room together. Sort of a recap, despite the pandemic, time marches on, and I wanted to, later than I really had intended to be, but I wanted to kick off the resumption of our deliberations by returning to the resolutions, the 9 resolutions that we worked through and submitted to council. It's my perspective that in light of a lot of issues that were put on the record, council did not feel, in some respects, that the timing to approve these for placement on the ballot in the November 2020 election was appropriate. So I wanted to come back, and they did, I believe the minutes of that meeting will bear out that they did leave the door open for these and other issues to come back before council for approval. Now again, with the deadline hanging over our head that even for a November election, the supervisor of election needs to have whatever we're going to put forward in the hands of that office by mid-August. I wanted to at least move these forward tonight and then have some discussion about where we might go from here. Now, to recap, we submitted 9 items to the City Council. General terms, the extension of the mayoral term from 2 to 4 years, a clarification of the consecutive years of service, a resolution that it would have been combined between mayor and council, whatever combination that was, but 12 consecutive years would be the limit without a break. Next would have been an expansion of the time within which a sitting member of council would need to file a resign to run letter, so that would give fair notice to the clerk to be able to have that, if needed, that seat on the ballot for election, as well as clear notice to others who might want to pursue what up to that point had been an otherwise empty seat. Other issues, a resignation during any time in a term, you would be deemed to have served the balance of that term for term limit calculations. The next was special election to fill vacancies, having an unexpired term of more than 1 year, expanding the mayor's exclusive window of opportunity to make an appointment for a seat of less than 1 year from 60 to 90 days. The next item was the provision that if a vacancy occurred in the office of vice mayor, that the person who received the next highest number of votes in the previous vice mayor's race would automatically accede to that title. Another was no opting out of the vice mayor ballot. And finally, increasing the number of members on the charter-mandated charter review committee from 5 to 7 members, it being our perspective and intention that each member of council and the mayor would have an appointment to those charter-mandated committees. Now, what happened is that we had a special call council meeting for the council to consider all 9 of those items. 4 of those items in the first go-round at the special call meeting were set aside as not going forward from the get-go. The mayoral term, the clarification of consecutive years of service where we combined mayor and council, and the 2 vice mayor provisions where if the vice mayor seat became vacant, would go to the next person who received, to the person who received the next highest number of votes, and no opting out of the vice mayor ballot.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Guzman.
thank you. Could you tell us what numbers those are? I know it's number 1, number 4,
Here, Matt, does the resolution in our, I think if you go to toward the back, not the formal resolution, but page 6 to Exhibit 2 of car number 2935, about 3/4 of the way through our agenda packet. If you look, it says page 6 and then car number 2935, Exhibit 2. Probably 10 pages from the back of our package. Got it? Okay. So, question 1, the mayoral term of office did not go forward from the special call meeting. Number 2, did not go forward. Number 3, did go forward. Number 4, interestingly enough, did go forward. Number 5 went forward. Number 6 went forward. 7 and 8 did not make the first cut at the special call meeting. And number 9 did go forward. I'm sorry? Sure. One more time. All right. Now, again, to put it in perspective, there were two separate meetings where the council considered our proposals. We first sent in 9 proposals. All right, so you're back here on this page where it says start at the top, it says section 4, form of ballot. Okay. Number 1 did not go forward. Number 2 did not go forward. 3, 4, 5, and 6 did go forward. Seven and 8 did not. And 9 did go forward. So I guess my purpose here tonight, and just to, again, to remind everyone and put it on the record, following that special call meeting, those items that went forward were considered just a few days later, within a week of the special call meeting. Ultimately, none of the 9 items that we submitted to council went forward for approval of placement on the ballot. So that's where we are.
For 2020. For the 2020 election,
They were not approved to go on the November 2020 ballot. That's correct. None were. Now, realistically, I come here with the perspective that the door was not really shut on any of them, even those, a couple of those who may have not made the first cut. Clearly, the conversation, as I said earlier, was about timing and implications for, probably fairness or impact on those sitting on council or having just left council at that point. And some of those considerations are no longer in play, given that by the time these go on the ballot, a year will have expired, which will have eliminated a lot of those underlying issues. So I wanted to get a feel tonight as to just some discussion item by item. We can start with, the number 1 through 9, as to this board's perspective as to what, if any, from those 9, we would like to see the council reconsider for placement on the November 2020 ballot. So with that, I'll open up the discussion.
Mr. Mayor, could you tell us what council meeting it was presented to so that we could go back and look at those minutes?
Special call June 29th, is that correct?
I believe the special call was
16,
July 16th, and then the council meeting was July 22nd. I think. If I have, I'll,
So we can certainly circulate those among the
special call was
members.
July 16th. The special call was July 16th.
Special call July
Yes.
16th with the final meeting, the regular council meeting.
July 22nd.
July 22nd.
Sorry.
And if you could also help me understand how these were presented. Were they in an agenda and they said, we're going to look at all of them, but we're immediately going to scratch 1, 2, like what was the procedure?
When charter amendments are presented to the council, we place the whole resolution as recommended. At the first meeting, it's their first pass through, so we go item by item, and then I take a vote on each question, and then each question is considered individually. At the end of that time, we'll take a vote on the resolution as amended to move forward or not. So at the July 16th, we went question by question. Some were voted to proceed, some were voted not to. On July 22nd, the 5 questions that of the 9 that remained, we began a discussion of whether or not, going one by one on those 5 questions, because there were some changes that needed to be made to the language in order to accommodate the discussion that took place on the 16th. But before we really got into the depth of any individual question at the July 22nd meeting, the conversation shifted to whether or not we wanted it on the November 2020 ballot, or do we want it on perhaps a city ballot. And there was a lengthy discussion. You can review the minutes. And ultimately, it was decided that the item to be deferred. Maybe the committee could consider additional portions of the charter that they would like to see updated and revised, as opposed to the limited questions with additional time. Maybe not. But it was decided at that time that it wouldn't go on the November 2020 ballot.
So the questions that he said did not make the cut, were there any of those questions that the council wanted to see revised language?
It's a July 16th. It wasn't about revised language on those questions. It was the question themselves, whether or not the issue would move forward. I was given limited direction on some of the other items that did move from the 16th meeting to the 22nd meeting.
No, I guess my question is, any of these questions that were here, did the council want to see us revise the language in those questions?
No, I wasn't asked to revise the language for those questions.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Guzman. Mr. Maldonado? Okay. I don't know if you were in the queue or not.
I was going through the minutes of that meeting and recalling the meeting itself. I think you're correct in saying that the council seemed to be okay with the 5 questions that were left from the 9. And from those 5, I think part of one of the concerns or one of the things that they wanted to see is not to be on the general presidential election due to the number of items that were going to be on there anyway. So, and then to have it more on the local election was one of the concerns, or something that was mentioned. Another one that I recall is that of, if not 2, at least 2 of the council members had made mention, and if there was going to be a deeper dive into these items or the charter as a whole, because it was mentioned that we were going to stay together to possibly discuss other items on the charter, which were talked about but never and we never took any steps in those. And the two items were that of single-member districts, and then the other one was the on-cycle, off-cycle elections. So to answer, I guess, if we're going to, the way I feel is if we're going to bring this to the council and ask them to vote on this, to put it on an election, my opinion would be we don't change anything that out of the 9, that we leave it at the 5 that they had agreed to, and I think that gives us a good chance of getting those passed according to what they said. So I'm okay with, my recommendation would be to go with the 5. If we want to bring those other, if we as a committee would want to take up those other 4 back up, re-talk about it, rehash it, maybe give it another look at it, I'm open to having that discussion. I'm not opposed to it. But I would, just going off of the minutes that I read and recalling the meeting, there seemed not to be an appetite for those 4 that did not go through. That's my opinion, from my reflection from those minutes and the meeting. So I'm okay with the 5, not the 9, if we wanted to move forward on that. I'll just hold off for the rest of my colleagues for now. I'll have some more to say afterwards.
Thank you, Mr. Maldonado, and I guess I'd like to hear from the committee as to what the perspective would be on revisiting some of those other 4. As I said in my upfront comments, the application to certain individuals as it would have existed a year ago are different than they are today. Some of the votes at council were very close, and I, didn't know where it was going to go until the last minute. I think clearly, though, questions 7 and 8 dealing with the vice mayor are totally non-starters based on what I heard, where no one gets to opt out of the vice mayor ballot, and the procedure for filling the vacancy in the office of vice mayor. I mean, clearly, head and shoulders above that. There were those of my elected colleagues who were offended even by the implication that becomes a political football. Who's going to be on the ballot? Who's not? And I don't have a vote on the committee, but my perspective is those 2 items, which I have numbered as 7 and 8, are absolute non-starters. I don't know that that's the case for 1 and 2, but I'd love to hear from the rest of you. Mr. Craig.
I watched at least one of those special meetings, special call meetings, virtually at home. And I was quite surprised and a little disappointed at the amount of time that each of the council members spent discussing those, because they had access to all our minutes. I mean, everything they discussed, we had already discussed. And I felt that if they had reviewed our minutes closely, they would have answered a whole lot of the questions that they raised during those meetings. Is it our perception that it would be, both to the mayor and to Matthew, is it our perception that it would be futile to put the ones that did not go forward, to put those forward again? Mr. Mayor, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In your esteemed opinion.
Okay, so he directed the question to me, Matt. You're out of the I can't answer that hot seat. As I recall, and I haven't looked at the minutes in a while, but I lived through that agony. Questions 1 and 2, I think, are worth revisiting. And certainly, you know, that was for the 21 election. Mr. Pearl and I had a conversation earlier that if we were to entertain that, it would be decided in 21 to be effective in the 23 election. You really can't run for an office where you don't know what the term is, because the charter election and the mayoral election would be held at the same time. So, you know, we had the mayoral 4-year term commencing this year. If it were to go forward, I think the only way to do that would be to do it in some future election, not concurrently with the potential adoption of that provision. You know, I think the mathematical calculations that were going through some folks' heads at the council table as to question number 2, as to 12 consecutive years, given the passage of time, that no longer takes at least a couple of people out of contention for coming back and running for office. Had it been adopted last year, it would have applied to a couple of folks that seem to have a sympathy of the majority of council. And again, due to the passage of time, to the extent that was a factor, it is no longer a factor in as to the consecutive issue.
Well, I guess my question then is, since we all worked very, very hard on all 9 of these, and we all made either our arguments for or against each of the 9 provisions, what do we have to lose to put all 9 of them forward again? Do we have anything to lose?
I would answer you this way. As to 7 and 8 dealing with the vice mayor, my recollection is that was a resounding, not just no, but heck no. The others were far more of a real narrowly split decision and probably had to do with timing. But again, if that's the will and pleasure of those of you who have a vote, I'll go to bat for you. I did last time, and I'll do it again. You all represent the appointees of the members of the council. And I agree, Mr. Craig. We all worked long and hard, and perhaps had due consideration been given to a close reading of the minutes, maybe the meeting wouldn't have taken as long. Might have been the same outcome, but it wouldn't have taken as long.
Well, then, as always, I respect your opinion, and particularly your perspective on this. However, again, we all came up with these 9, and it seems to me that if we all worked so hard on them, we all believed them at the time, even if we quote know that 7 and 8 are going to be shot down, I see that we have nothing to lose by putting them forward again. We might be pleasantly surprised. I think that we should send the whole slate forward. That's just my opinion.
Questions, comments?
Through the chair, if I may.
Sure, go ahead. Welcome to the conversation.
I agree with Mr. I've been here. I apologize. I had foot surgery and I was unable to physically attend. Otherwise, I would have been present. I agree with Mr. Craig. Let's go for it again. Let's see what the results are.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Hope you can join us soon.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. So, Mr. Guzman? Whoever was next, speak up. Speak up.
I don't remember, thank you, Mayor. I don't remember the conversation we were having regarding that topic. Can we discuss that again?
Which topic?
Question number 1. Because the minutes don't seem to reflect a lot on that question. And since it's been a year.
Well, the final minutes would not. It would have been the entire history of the minutes on the issue-by-issue basis. The minutes before us were the recap of our meeting that voted to transmit it to council.
So if some of my colleagues can just reiterate or discuss what were the pros and cons to that question. Does anybody have a recollection of that?
On the mayoral term,
Yeah.
Mr. Craig?
If I recall, I'm sorry, through the chair,
Yes.
we discussed the mayor having time to basically be the mayor before he has to run again, correct? Because the current time only gives him time to be the mayor for 1 year and then work on being reelected the next year, correct?
I agree that was one of many factors in the conversation. Absolutely so.
Well, I just felt that 4 years would, I never understood the concept of why the mayor would have to come up every 2 years where other members of the council could be for 4 years. And I hearken back to I think I've used this anecdote before, my time in D.C., newly elected representatives, the anecdote is it takes them 2 years to find out where the bathrooms are. So even accepting that some of the mayoral candidates had served on the city council before, I still think 4-year term for the mayor just makes sense. Simple as that.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. And Mr. Guzman, one of the other issues, and this kind of goes back historically, there was a point in time where not every member of council was elected to a 4-year term, that there was a combination. And it was set up where the mayor and 3 council members, just as now, ran every two years. And there came a point in time during Ms. Bell's administration where questions were put before the voters. And interestingly enough, all of the council members, the provision awarding a 4-year term to council members was passed, and this would have been in '08. But the mayoral question was not approved by the voters. I kind of, my input is that, and I'm clear, and I'm not going to hide from it. In years gone by, both in and out of office, I opposed a 4-year term for the mayor. But we are now a city that's 3 and 4 times the size of the city we are now. It's very difficult, and this is my problem, the mayor's problem, not the city's problem. It's difficult to run a campaign, but I've come to realize there's kind of an issue of fairness that those the mayor is working with a lot of times have the upper hand, because with the 4-year term or being in the middle of a 4-year term, they can take contrary positions or have the luxury of working on projects that a mayor really doesn't have, given an abbreviated term in comparison to the mayor's elected colleagues on council.
Mr. Mayor, why back in 2008 were you opposed to it?
Well, I was not on council, and I was on the beginning years of my vacation from elected service. Again, we were a much smaller city with a different dynamic, and I didn't support at the time a 4-year term for everyone on council. And those of us with a long history can look back and see that the weak sheep got the 2-year terms, and seeming from where I sit, my perspective is those who were productive and the stronger members of council were awarded by the voters with a 4-year term. And at the time, being a smaller community and again, just entirely different dynamics, it maintained that in every election cycle, a majority of council could potentially be changed. And that's still the case. And if the mayor's term were to go to a 4-year term, to the extent it may be relevant to your thinking, a majority of council is not subject to being changed except in a mayoral year. Mr. Maldonado?
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to see, I think maybe just, I have a thought. My thought is that, one, it would be good if we had the minutes reflecting those conversations in the past. So from the city clerk's office to have minutes pulled in discussion of the 4-year term. So I was on that charter review committee back in 2008 when that was discussed. And then I know that I appointed Mayor Lausner to be my appointee. That was 2013, 14, somewhere around there. The second time, the last charter review where it was discussed. And so if we could have the minutes on that item, the 4-year discussion, I think that would help shed some light on what others also spoke about that. I'd like to see that, brought forward or disseminated to the rest of my colleagues so that they could take some time and get the understanding of those past members and their thoughts and the thought process. I think that really helps shed some light on some of the issues. And I think also we should also have the minutes provided. I mean, we could go online and get it, by the way, but it'd be easier if it's disseminated to my colleagues, the minutes from the 2 special call? Okay, well, those 2 meetings that were discussing the charter items, if we could have those minutes provided as well, that would help highlight some of those discussions or issues. Also, if you don't want to read, you could, there's one that you could watch a video for the council meeting, right? That was recorded, so that one is online. So maybe provide the link for everyone to have so they could watch the video and the discussion on that. And then I don't think we did a video on the special call, but if we have audio, it would be good if the audio is provided as well. Is that possible, City Clerk?
Let me ask Mr. Pearl.
Sure.
Those were both virtual meetings, correct? Yes. Okay. So I don't know what the quality of the video would be if it exists, but certainly there would be audio to a certain extent.
Right, minutes and video, so you have them both so that one or the other. If something's not clear, then you could go to the minutes. If you watch the video and it's not clear, then just go to the minutes. That would be helpful. That would be something that I'd like to, for that to be brought forward for our next meeting, or not even our next meeting, as soon as possible, I guess, given to our colleagues. Huh? Yeah. And then, 2, I'd like to kind of just pick up on, I'm sorry, Mr. Guzman, are you finished with your time? Okay, I'm sorry. Let me pause there and then let you go back and finish your thought process.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
You may.
During every 2 years that the mayor has to run, can my colleagues tell me if that is a purpose to draw voters to come out and vote? Was that ever part of the process, given the fact that you guys have a lot of years experience? Has that always been part of the reason has that been an argument? The mayor pulls more people out to vote, which is why they do it every 2 years.
That I will say, from my experience, that has been an argument. But you could also look at raw numbers and see that in many cases, there are more votes cast in one or more council races that year than are cast in a mayor's race. So, I think, yes, clearly, and we're talking about ancient history, clearly so. Today, my perspective is not so much. And again, even going back to 2001, the first time I was elected to council, I received a significant number of votes than for an at-large council seat than did a sitting mayor with an adversary. And I think that's been consistent through the years. I know, I think Mr. Fletcher even got more votes than I did in the last Homestead election. So I don't know if that's statistically significant, but yes, to answer your question, in years past, that has been an argument.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So yes, I would concur with what was the mayor just said. It was my opinion. It was my opinion that what happened. I'll tell you what happened in 2008. It was very simple. It's my opinion, but something I was on this ground and I heard it directly from voters, and it was just an opposition to the current mayor. My opinion was that it was boiled down to was like, we'll give the 4 year to the rest of the council, but not to that mayor. That's what I heard on the streets, and I think it was so. If it's something that's not dealing with current, and by the way, that was also mentioned by one of the members, David Payne, I believe it was his name, was Mr. Payne, that he was he was an executive at the First National Bank of Homestead. He himself said it. I do recall that in a meeting, in the charter review meeting, saying that if you wanted this to pass or to be, and actually I said it in my minutes, we'll reflect that in our meetings as well, that if you wanted this to play out, the proper way is to put it way down the road so that it doesn't look like the current mayor benefits at all. And it was my understanding that that's the way they were going to go, but for whatever reason, it was on the ballot different. So that was definitely an issue. I think, and I mentioned it last time, I think if we're going to make this decision, that you need to put it far ahead of us, of any sitting mayor, so that it won't look like it's beneficial for that sitting mayor. So to answer your question, Matt, if I can, let me ask a question now. So under the agenda right now for today, we just had a topic discussion of retransmittal of prior resolution to the city council. So that's really the only thing that we're going to be voting on today?
Yes, I mean, if we have a small window of time. If you've requested additional information, it seems like regarding questions that were on the original resolution, you don't have to decide that today if you feel like you need more. But I would encourage you, it's imperative that whatever is done, the council have ample opportunity to consider it. As we've seen, it didn't get done in a single meeting last time. And I'd like to make sure that whatever happens between this committee and the council, that we're finished by the July council meeting, so that we don't have a question of whether or not we're going to be able to make the ballot.
And that's, thank you for answering that. And that's why I had asked, maybe I kind of jumped the position, but that's the reason why I asked for all those other minutes to be provided, so that we feel like we did our read into it, take some time, look at the minutes, so that when we make a decision on this, that it doesn't really have to be done today. We can make the decision in the next meeting, if that be whatever of this council wants, of this body would like to do. It's not really tabling. It's just saying, look, well, we could wait till the next meeting after you read the minutes. If you feel comfortable to make the vote today, I don't have a problem with that. That's one, because I know we have a time issue. Two, I did spend a little bit of time in the minutes from the council meetings, again, reflecting on those. I was part of both of those meetings, and the one thing that was kind of reiterated by some of my colleagues or former colleagues or the council members was that of, did this committee really take the time to do a deep dive and really dig into this charter, this charter review committee, deep dive into the charter to figure out what else can be brought forward and worked on. And that was obviously discussed due to the fact that since we had kept this committee together to kind of continue the discussion of two other items or other items that are in the charter. So I guess my question would be to Mr. Pearl, if we wanted to add any other items to from the charter to be brought forward to the council, would this be the time to do it? When would be the right time to do that? Because going from the notes and minutes from my past colleagues is that, when are we going to take the time to really dive down and solve some of these other issues? And the two issues the one issue that I wanted to bring up last time that we weren't able to, and we kind of kicked the can down the road on, was that of on-cycle elections. I know that there's some discussion that has to happen on that, but that was something that I wanted to bring forward if possible. I do have some notes, and I'm wondering can I read I have some, not notes, but two articles to kind of discuss, my point of why I'd like to see this come forward. Maybe I could leave that for the next meeting if we could bring that discussion back. Is that possible? Well, I would say that would be to my colleagues. My colleagues that are up here. When we were chosen, we were picked to represent the city to look at the charter. I know that it's a lot to take in. It's a lot of language. The charter is basically what I call the law of the land. And as lay persons, I know it's difficult to really dig down into some of the issues, but I think it's important as well to dig down into those issues. So I would like to ask my colleagues that are up here today and Ms. Mallory that's on the phone, if you would support me in bringing a charter change or amendment on cycle, off-cycle elections, and the discussion at least let us discuss, which is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to go into the charter, find something that is questionable, might not be working, something that's old, that needs to be revised, bring that here to the Charter Review Committee, discuss it, and then bring it forward to the council members, then to let them have that final decision on what we've discussed. And I feel strongly about putting our election cycle back on year or on cycle elections. We're on an off cycle right now. And I have some notes and some articles that I read on this issue that I think we should discuss at some point. So to my colleagues, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. And also, is there anything else that maybe you know or aware of, or you took some time to read the charter, which I doubt, but so that we could tackle while we are here, while this committee is still put together?
Mr. Craig.
My recollection is that the city council, in its infinite wisdom, approved us to continue to work, that we were giving, I shouldn't say gratis, but they said, yes, we can continue our work beyond our defined terms. Therefore, I agree with Elvis that there are other issues. I'm particularly interested in single district elections myself. But right now, I would just like to get this off our plate and put these forward, either all of them or some of them, and then at our subsequent meetings of this committee, as long as the committee keeps meeting, we can discuss other things that we'd like to bring up to the city council. Because I don't think anything of substance, such as cycles or single district representation, is going to be settled in one or two meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. I appreciate your bringing it back to where we need to be. I mean, on the agenda tonight is some action on what we have worked on in the past. And whether it be at this point to get them off the table. The five that, was it five? Yes. The five that went to the second round at council, and holding the other 2 to 4 in abeyance pending receipt of the minutes that Member Maldonado has requested, and then moving on to items for future meetings. So with that, I guess I really, before we make a motion, I know Ms. Mallory has weighed in, and she supports going forward to council at this point with all 9. I don't know that there is support for that here among those of you who are here. So,
Mayor, if I could just ask a question, maybe to my colleagues, a question to my colleagues. Do you guys feel comfortable where making the decision today, or would you feel comfortable making the decision after you had the minutes and be able to go over things?
We discussed most of these ad infinitum, and I don't think, I would hope, that no one has changed their mind, since we were very adamant about our positions on each of these things. So I'm not quite sure what would be benefited by reviewing what we've already discussed. I felt...
I'm mentioning I'm talking about the minutes from the council, what they said in regards to these so when the 2 meetings happened, the minutes and the videos are going to reflect on their positions, their theories, their thoughts, and all that, which I had just requested that to be brought forward. So my question is, do you feel like you need those minutes in order to come to a decision at our next meeting, or are we comfortable today on voting on that?
Well, I don't think reviewing unless I'm going to have the opportunity to present our arguments to the city council, which doesn't seem likely. I don't think there's a need for us. I think it's educational, yes, to review the discussions by the city council. And for God's sakes, let's do it online. I don't want to kill any more trees. But if educational, yes. But I don't think how that bears on us putting these forward for retransmission. If the members of the committee would like to review the arguments, some of which I agree with and some of which I did not agree with from the city council, that's fine as an educational point of view. But I don't think it's going to help us in terms of presenting our case, and other than the mayor presenting our case of why each of these things should be passed. And I think he's capable of doing that. Thank you.
I'd like to hear from the rest of my colleagues if possible, if they don't mind sharing.
Through the chair, if I may.
yes, please, thank you.
Gentlemen, being the only woman that sits on this dais with you all in this ad hoc committee, I want to appreciate the experience that you all bring to the table. However, as Mr. Craig said, the time and devotion that we put into making those decisions, I'm comfortable with moving ahead with the vote myself.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to see the minutes as well, just to see other input. However, I don't have a recollection of every conversation we had, but I do feel at the time I supported these, and I think I still support them. As far as moving on to other things, I think it would be great if time permitted.
In terms of perhaps splitting the baby here and maybe getting everyone up to a comfort level, that we dispense, perhaps by motion tonight, to elect to move forward with, to resubmit questions 3, 4, 5, 6, and 9, leaving open the discussion on questions 1, 2, 7, and 8 for a future meeting upon review of our prior minutes and minutes of the 2 council meetings that address those issues. Yes.
So just to make sure I understand. So you're saying that the 5 that were okay, go ahead and push them forward again, and then we're bringing the 4 that did not go through, we're gonna bring it back for discussion? Or are you
That-
saying take them all forward? Right now,
No,
are you
no,
saying
no.
take them all
I'm-
forward?
I'm
or-
saying for purposes of today,
Uh-huh.
to clear something off our plate, because I'm sensing some difference of opinion
Yeah.
here. That today we act to move forward with the 5 questions that went to the regular council meeting, so that those are off of our plate. Those have
Yes.
moved forward. And then between now and our next meeting, everyone avail themselves and obtain any and all minutes that they want to review to educate themselves or refresh their memories on those other 4 questions, either at this table or at the council table, and then again have that discussion and perhaps act on each one of those 4 individually at our next session.
I'm okay with that.
And again, I suggest that I'm sensing that you know, we're missing a couple of how many members? 3 members?
2
2 members.
2 members.
We're missing 2 members, which is pretty significant. And I know there were lively discussions on at least the first 2 that we're not, you know, potentially not going to act on tonight. Maybe have a more full complement at the next meeting. So that you know, and again, I'm not a voting member, so I would look to someone to make a motion, and we'll see where that goes.
I would benefit, Mr. Mayor, from your reasoning of what will we gain by only putting forward the ones that they did put forward and withholding the ones they did not? What do we gain?
Well, we're gaining. I'm not saying not to put them forward. I'm saying that under that scenario, I sense that there is some difference of opinion and uncertainty as we sit here today as to revisiting, and most in particular, items 1 and 2. 7 and 8 were fairly, well, I think all of those were fairly contentious here as well at council. And, you know, I think there's probably, you know, some feeling too that we want council, I hope you want council to pay close attention to your commitment to what's being put forward and taking into account their comments in the last go-round.
Mr. Mayor,
You're welcome to move whatever you want, and we'll see what happens.
if I may.
Excuse one?
Oh, I'm sorry. No,
Yes.
to answer your question, one of the benefits. So we had before us tonight on your agenda was the exact resolution. As the mayor alluded to earlier, particularly with question 1, there was a question of a transition time and when that was to be put in place. And you know, Mr. Maldonado alluded to putting it forward, you know, way in the future. It could be the next election cycle, but it would likely not be this election cycle. So because this was anticipated to be completed theoretically in 2020, commencing that in 2021 allowed for everybody to know what term they were running for. We haven't had a discussion about when we would want it to be put in place now. I could bring you a final resolution subject to that discussion that implements exactly whatever your will is to recommend, how far out you would like to go with that time. That would be a virtue. It would allow me to get my ducks in a row on question 1 and rewrite this in a way to transition it in whatever manner you are all recommending. So, I mean, we have time between now and when this goes to council for the final resolution that you want to put forward. We can meet once, probably twice more before a council item has to be submitted for the May agenda. I just don't want you to feel like you're completely under the gun. We do have a little bit of wiggle room. So if you wanted to see the final language as opposed to just as amended, which I can't give you the final language, I could at a subsequent meeting.
Matthew, thank you. I think
Sure.
as your hair grows grayer, you get wiser. Then, Mr. Mayor, then I move that we put forward, I don't know how to exactly enunciate this, that we put forward the resolutions that that did go forward by the city council during their 2 meetings. And we withhold for future discussions the ones that did not.
So those were questions 3, 4, 5, 6, and 9. Extension of resigned to runtime, resignation, you're still tagged with the balance of your term, special election for a vacancy of more than 1 year, extending the mayoral's exclusivity period for an appointment from 60 to 90 days, and increasing the charter mandated charter committee from 5 to 7 members. Again, questions 3, 4, 5, 6, and 9. So that's Mr. Craig's motion to recommend to City Council that those items be placed on the November 2021 ballot, general election ballot. Is that correct, Mr. Craig?
Yes.
We have a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Guzman. I think Mr. Maldonado's chomping at the bit over here. So
No, you could, no, that was, I was gonna talk about something else about timeframes, but that could be afterwards.
All right, so let's have a roll call vote on that.
Mr. Booker,
Aye, in favor.
Mr. Craig,
Aye.
Mr. Guzman, Mr. Maldonado,
Yep. Yes.
Ms. Mallory.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously. All right, so to recap quickly, we'll make all of those prior minutes available, with emphasis on our minutes of the discussion on the mayoral term, the 12-year combination, and those other 2 issues regarding the vice mayor. Mr. Maldonado has made clear of some of his issues he would like to discuss at future meetings. With my only caution would be is that, you don't just adjust one provision of the charter without affecting others. And I'll take the slings and arrows for this. Those 2 issues are major undertakings that are likely not going to be resolved in time for placement on the ballot. But I'm happy to have those discussions and have this committee continue to do that hard work and put it in the lap of council for approval of future elections.
I would just seek direction on what information you want, which topics you want to move forward with, because those are in-depth discussions on both accounts, both single-member districts and the realignment. If I could get a little bit of direction on what you're seeking, I'll do my best to provide you the most I can and facilitate the discussion. So in the event there is a general consensus, maybe you can move forward. But if any information you could give me in terms of what you would like to see would be of great use.
Mr. Maldonado, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Mayor. Before, what I wanted to say right before the vote was to Mr. Pearl. Help me work backwards from the time frame that we have to work with so that we understand our working environment. If August, the mid-August, I believe, is where there's a final date where anything that's going to be put on the ballot needs to be provided to the Department of Elections. What is that day? And then help us to then look at moving backwards, that if we wanted to really tackle these other charter amendments, help me frame what that would look like, because we would have to come back. I'm assuming we're going to have to come back like we did during the first charter review committee, which we're meeting every Monday, right? So I think it's going to have to look like something like that to work on, because you're going to need to bring forward whatever we give you direction to bring forward, which one item is going to be that of the on-cycle, off-cycle elections. And then there was also discussions of the single-member districts. I'm advocating for, so that, and I don't know how you feel about this to the rest of my colleagues, the on-cycle, off-cycle, to me, would be more priority than the single-member districts. I'm not sure how the single-member districts and the off-year, on-year cycle, like you said, kind of work together. And Mr. Pro, I guess that would be something maybe that information you would bring back to us. So, I mean, for direction from me, or at least, and I don't know where my colleagues are on this, but I'd like to see that, that of off and on your election cycle be brought forth in the next discussion, next meeting.
Okay. So it looks like July 28th is the council meeting. I'd like to have everything wrapped up by July 28th. Ideally, you don't want the council to have a single crack at it, as we've had, history has shown us that these are lively discussions and have often required multiple meetings. I would love it if whatever this committee was going to put forward, we can complete by the end of June, so that, and also summer availability is also touch and go. So we gave the council ample opportunity during the month of July to meet perhaps early, maybe refer something back to the committee at least once before we got to that council meeting at the end of July. But I think that we should all view that as sort of the stop date for consideration of anything. So I'd like to work, if we're going to consider new topics, I'd like to spend some time in May, and I'd hopefully have that stuff put together by the end of May. That would be, my hope for the time, for my time frames, if that's something that the committee is going to do. So that would give us, I think 4 meetings between now and then, sort of make some recommendations. These are the questions. Both of those issues are complicated and have wide-reaching implications. So I'd appreciate as much time as I could to do the drafting and map these things out. We'll have to chart out everybody's terms, and it'll impact people sitting on the dais in one way or another, both of them. And particularly with the single-member districts, as that discussion has taken place before, when the discussion took place in 2013, 14, about then we had an expert come in and meet with the committee. It was a professor at FAU who worked on those issues, and he was able to answer like a lot of logistical questions and the implications. I'd like this committee to enjoy the benefit of that as well if we're going to go down that road. So the sooner you tell me, the sooner I'll start compiling information, and we'll get as far as we can go. But I would view July 28th as our stop date for the council meeting. Whatever is going to go is going to have to be before the council by the 28th.
And I would also just add my perspective that may be the end date for council to direct something to be placed on the ballot. But looking at history and comments in the last go-round that we submitted, the council is also going to want to have time to have targeted public input before they vote to put these on the ballot. It's not going to be one of those, we're going to put something out there and spend money to do it and have it fail. So we are really putting ourselves in a tight time frame for two far-reaching and very legalistic issues that perhaps can't go into effect until maybe 23 or 2025. So it's not like we're under the gun. It's going to take years of phasing. So just a word of caution. This is not the first time that this committee has heard those two issues being something that were of interest for a topic of discussion. So Matt, whatever you need to put together.
I will provide you, I want clear direction. I don't want to be the reason that you guys are being held up. So you tell me what you want, and I will get it to you, and then I'll leave it in your hands. So if we're going to meet next week, if you could tell me, I don't think a single meeting is going to get through both of those topics.
Not at all. And in my mind, I had next week that perhaps we were going to revisit the mayoral term, the definition of 12 consecutive years of service, kind of going back and having the discussions on the questions, the first round of questions that didn't go forward last time, that we would probably not take up either single member districts or conversion to even year elections until the following meeting. And it'll take you at least that long to get that information together. Just some background.
I will make happen what you would like. I
So,
need the directions.
Matt, let me just ask a question.
Sure.
If I ask for direction to have that item of on-cycle election as a committee member, are you supposed to bring it, or do I have to direct it to the mayor in order to approve it?
Well, no, I mean, historically, the mayor's not a voting member, so it's
So
if the
is
committee
he-
wants to see something, historically, there's been this is the outline. This is what the topics we'd like to see. And to set the agenda for the coming meeting, I'll get a consensus of what you'd like to see on the agenda, the topic, because we are time limited. We
So
cap this in an hour and a half.
I just want to be clear, Matt. When we're setting the agenda about what's to come up next, right? From my understanding, we're the voting members, right? I know that the mayor chairs it, right? And so I want to be clear in my thinking. If I'm asking for this to be a discussion item, do I need other members to join on with me to reiterate, to agree with me for that to happen, or is it the mayor that decides what's going to be on here or
Well,
not?
it's the committee, so if you wanted to, you can make a motion for to direct me, and your voting members can do that, and I will get whatever the committee
Okay,
wants.
yeah, because
I will provide.
I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you that you want some clear directions. So
Yes.
I want to help you get some clear directions, but I want to be clear on the directions and how that procedure is going to
Okay,
work.
I
So
would
there's no
make a
confusion.
motion for your
Okay.
committee members.
What I'd like to do is make a motion, and am I allowed to make a motion at this time?
Sure, it's an open
Okay.
floor.
So I'd like to make a motion, so in our next meeting, or not, I don't know if you could start to provide that in the next meeting. I know that we're going to discuss items 1 and 2, but also we bring the discussion, or if you can, at this one, the next one, that of on and off-cycle election to be discussed.
Okay, I mean, if.
Do I need a second do I need to make a motion? So I make that as a motion to have on-cycle elections amendment changed for the next meeting.
As I sit here and listen, we're here to put together questions that we want changed in the charter. So typically, if someone says, hey, I've got this topic that I'd like to discuss, then you see if there's an appetite for this body that wants to get into that particular topic. So you would say, hey, I'd like to do on-cycle elections because it's going to benefit us. Just a quick synopsis, and then I go, okay, definitely interested in learning more about that. So then we put it on the agenda, right?
Pretty much.
So that's typically, what is our current population? Does anybody know exactly what that is?
Just call it 80.
80,000? Okay. So out of that 80,000, we would say how many are registered voters? And then out of those registered voters, what is the typical turnout in the election cycle? And then considering what Mr. Maldonado's saying, if we put this on a non-cycle election, you say, okay, this is going to draw a much larger turnout and it'll go in this direction. And that gives me an opportunity to analyze that information and say, okay, I feel great about that information, or it's not as beneficial to our city that I thought it could be. So I would need more information to analyze that topic.
Mr. Pearl?
So, before we get there, if there's an appetite to learn more, then that's great. Then you can second the motion. We can take a vote. And then what I would ask for once that's done is exactly what you described, which is what information, if we're going to discuss this, do you feel you need to evaluate the question, and I'll make sure that that information is compiled and presented to you.
And then our colleagues would say, are there case studies on similar size cities and what that has done if it has been implemented? That kind of gives us some information that we could make an educated decision with.
And those are the types of things that I'll try to research
professor from FAU.
and bring back to you. If this is the topic that we want to discuss, then I will get you every piece of information I can on it.
Okay, so I'll second the motion, then I have a question afterwards.
Sure.
Any further discussion on the motion to place the issues of single-member district and converting to even-year elections on the next agenda if the...
Because of the time frame, and I know that reflecting back to the minutes that we did talk about single-member districts, the only one that I made a motion to bring forward because of the timing is that of on-year and off-year cycle elections. So that's my motion. I'm not bringing the other one because of a time thing.
My mistake.
Huh?
My mistake.
Yeah, I know. I just
Okay.
for the record. That's all. I'm just
I
reflecting.
know. Self-serving either way. All right, so we have a motion to put the issue, to begin the discussion at our next meeting, following the session of the questions we didn't address tonight, to have the discussion, to begin the discussion about converting to even-year elections in the city of Homestead.
What information are we going to be provided to talk about that topic?
No? What do you want? What do you think is relevant? Tell the attorney.
You tell me what you want. I mean, the things that you mentioned
Case study.
about case study, but the things that you mentioned about voting statistics are relevant to the discussion on cycle off cycle. I will look for similarly sized cities. I'll see if there was something that where there was a recent change from off cycle to on cycle, and then if they're in those cities, presuming we can find them, we'll pull the voting stats from before and after the change, and that should give you a glimpse of whether or not participation increased. Whatever. I mean, are you most interested in voter participation?
Exactly what you mentioned is what I'm interested in.
Okay, that's what I'll be looking for, and I will do my best to find it. And I hope you find it instructive. If there's anything else, you can tell me now, or if something occurs to anybody on the committee over the course of the next couple of days, I'll have to submit the agenda. I'll have to get the agenda wrapped up by the end of this week for next week. But if something occurs to you tomorrow, Wednesday, and you think there's something else that you'd like to see, reach out to me, and I'll do my best to accommodate that request.
Well, and even and I think we've seen it before, a chart of what cities in Miami-Dade County have odd year versus even year cycles. Mr. Craig?
Yes, Matthew, just to save time.
Sure.
My request was going to be, and will be, that you provide us with information succinctly and briefly. I understand that the single district representation has been brought up before. I don't want to go back to the time of the flood.
We're talking about even years only right now.
Say what?
Even year only right now.
Well,
That's-
no, he could make an amendment if he'd like to. If that would be, is that a friendly amendment to my motion?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
So-
Mr. Maldonado, let me remind you, I'm the chair. I know it's hard to leave the table and come back, but I'll coordinate who's doing
Okay.
what as to what motions. But yeah, Mr. Craig, if we do go forward, yes, absolutely. That is a very complex, can be a very complex situation. So we have a motion and a second with respect to beginning consideration of the issue of converting from odd year to even year elections. I just want to interject this. For me, it's not about participation. It's about an engaged voter. Okay? And I'll make this, and I'll make these comments later. But in an even year election, we are at the bottom of a very lengthy ballot. Those of us who have been involved in campaigns, some of us spend a lot of time and effort to very cleanly, succinctly, and very nuanced provide campaign mail or, either old snail mail or electronic means. In an even year election, that gets lost in the shuffle of national, state, and county elections. And those who go to the bottom of the ballot aren't necessarily an informed voter. And quite frankly, I think the effort here is to partisanize and ethnicize our elections. You know what? If people of different ethnic and racial backgrounds would educate themselves and participate, it doesn't matter what year we have it in, and there is no room for partisan politics as they existed 5 years ago or today in this city's election.
Thank you, Mayor. And, can I share some parting words as well? I'm glad that you said that, and I really got. If I can, let me just read this article that I wanted to share at the next meeting in regards to why I am making this a statement. It's not for me. I mean, his opinion is that of a partisan, and he's open to have an opinion. It's fair. There are studies that show otherwise, and so I'll quickly just read this article for the record as to why I'm bringing this forward. And it says, why does no one vote in local elections? Timing is everything, and moving them to align with national polls would drive up participation. This is from a professor of political science at the University of San Diego. It says, quote, America's uneven democracy, turnout, race, and representation in city politics. America is facing a crisis on which, for once, Democrats and Republicans can agree: low voter turnout in local elections. Nationwide, only 27% of eligible voters vote in a typical municipal election. I wish we had 27%. We have less than that. New York City is typical. In 2017, 25% of the city's registered voters participated in the mayoral contest. In Los Angeles, turnout has been so low, 20% of registered voters in 2017, that the city council has used cash prizes to encourage voting. The numbers get even worse as you go way down the ladder to county, school board, and special elections. The result is that an extraordinarily unrepresented set of residents determines how local governments distribute services and spend the almost $2 trillion that local governments control. In some places, that means that politically active, conservative, wealthy, older, white voters have disproportionately sway over local government. In others, that means that organized and energetic unions can move their policy their way. Seldom is that control shared across the spectrum, and democracy suffers as a result. This isn't a new problem, and it causes are fairly obvious. Many local elections are held on dates other than national elections, sometimes in a different day, sometimes in an off year in between midterms and presidential votes. It's hard enough getting people to vote for president and Congress. It's even harder to get them out again to vote for a county and city officials. Fortunately, there is an equal, simple solution, and it comes at little cost. Move the dates of local elections to coincide with statewide and national contests. The logic is clear. When local elections are not held on the first Tuesday of November with other statewide and national contests, local voters need to learn the date of their local election, find their local election polling place, and make a specific trip to the polls just to vote on local contests. That is a lot of extra work just to vote for a school board contest or a special district measure. By moving those elections to coincide with national elections, though we make local voting essentially costless, citizens who are already voting for higher level offices need only check off a few more boxes further on the ballot. That small change in timing makes a huge difference in turnout. In 2016, Baltimore moved to on-cycle elections and its over participation soared. Registered voters turnout went from just 13% to the last election before the switch to 60% on the first on-cycle election. San Diego has on-cycle election participation and generally high turnout, 76% in November of 2016. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. And I'll share this with you guys so that you could continue to read. But as you can see, there's studies, and plus there's one for the National Policy Institute of America that speaks to us that was just brought out in 2020. So it's not a partisan issue. It's clearly stated here in this article provided by the New York Times that is both a Republican and Democrat issue. We have low voter turnout. The last election for 2019, 1,200 something voted for the mayor, and 1,800, 17 over a little over 1,700, almost 1,800 voted for one of the council members. To his point, but the point is, under 4,000 people voted for a city that has what, maybe 30,000 registered voters, and we have 80,000 people who live here. And going back to my notes, that what I put on the record in the past, the reason why I brought this forward is because whenever I walked and I knocked on people's door in the past, they clearly told me, I don't only pay attention to politics when it's the presidential election. So that is a time when we could get all these important items before them when they are paying attention. That's the only reason why I'm bringing it forward. So it's not because of partisan. Like I said, you're entitled to your opinion, but that's all it is. Thank you.
So that was a New York Times article?
New York Times article. There was, but I also have one from the National.
No partisanship there.
Oh,
No bias there.
well, I mean, yeah. It
Oh,
clearly
could you
says
please send that to the clerk so we can have it in the
Yes, I
record and
definitely will.
investigate the author and
Yep.
the whole context that it's in?
I will
And-
send that
and-
all to the
and-
city clerk. I will send that one and the other 5 articles that I have from all different ones. Because I didn't want. I'm not a New York Times fan as well, but it's an article that has facts.
You're right. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, even those of you who are wrong. But
So we have a motion.
let
on
me
the
let me
floor.
just throw this out there. My son pointed this out to me. Coral Gables has their election in odd years, not even in November. They have 4 times the turnout that the city of Homestead has percentage-wise. When you have an engaged and educated voting community, they're going to show up whenever. And with absentee voting, early voting, and election day opportunities, there is no excuse not to vote. But I don't fear the conversation. I don't agree with it. I think there are personal agendas going on here, but I don't have a vote. So there is a motion and a second on the table. Mr. Craig.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to call the question because I'd like to make a motion myself when we done with this.
Absolutely. So the question's been called. I don't think there's any other comments. So let's have a roll call vote on the motion to move forward with the discussion of even year elections?
Mr. Craig? Mr. Guzman?
Yes.
Ms. Mallory?
Yes.
Mr. Maldonado?
Yes.
Mr. Booker?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you, motion carried. Mr. Craig, the floor is yours.
I move that this committee, at the appropriate time, within the time limits, address the issue of single district representation. And I know that Mr. Pearl will provide us with a succinct and brief background on the pros and cons of that issue.
I second that motion.
Mr. Pearl, go ahead. It's been moved and seconded, so Mr. Pearl?
Okay, now, in terms of presentation, perhaps we can go back, because this was thoroughly discussed at the last charter, the last real charter review. We can dig up the minutes, and there may actually be the recording of the expert, the FIU professor who came and was engaged in that discussion. I'll work with the clerk to see if I can provide that all to you in advance. This way you will be familiar. We don't have to waste actual time or use actual, I don't want to say waste, but we don't have to use the time, the limited time that we have meeting. So I'll work with the clerk to provide that to you as soon as possible. And then, given the breadth of what we're supposed to discuss next week, I doubt we'll get there, but you'll have ample opportunity to review that material before perhaps the following meeting when we have time to discuss it, if that's okay.
Yes, Matt, that's fine. Like I said, I don't need the entire history of this. Perhaps the last full discussion, brief, succinct, pros and cons, and so less a burden on you also.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Thank you, Mr. Pearl. Any further questions or comments on the motion? Mr. Guzman?
We finished that vote, right?
We have not voted. We finished the vote on the even year discussion. We are now having discussion on a motion to move forward in the future with single-member districts.
Okay, I have a question after that. So,
Question after that? Okay. Mr. Maldonado.
Call the question.
All right, let's have a roll call on Mr. Craig's motion.
Mr. Craig?
Aye.
Mr. Guzman? Ms. Mallory?
Aye.
Mr. Maldonado?
Yes, for discussion.
Mr. Booker?
Aye.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Mr. Guzman.
thank you, Mayor. I've never asked a sitting mayor how you feel about 2-year term versus the 4-year term, since you're going through it right now. What are some of the challenges you face with a 2-year term?
Well, pandemic aside, okay, let's ignore the fact that we lost a year. I mean, we were here working, surviving every day. Government typically does not move quickly. And to hatch an idea, to have it vetted through staff, to bring it to council, to bring in partners, is a very time-consuming process. And you may have made the comment earlier, someone did, you spend half the time being mayor and half the time campaigning. Well, if you're doing a good job as mayor, that is your campaign. You don't have to overtly campaign. But let's say you're distracted and there are those who paint every word that comes out of your mouth as campaign-oriented. So, in that regard, a 4-year term would allow a mayor, any given mayor, time to get his or her footing with those who the public decides to seat to his or her left and right, and move forward. And as I said, at the glacial speed at which government works, and now with the size and the complexity of our city, it is very difficult to see things through. And, Mr. Maldonado full well, it took years. We talked about it at the ribbon cutting of the Cybrarium. From conception to ribbon cutting was over 5 years. We're still friendly enough and cordial enough for the most part in this community that those who are no longer in office but who took part in that process were invited to take part. But there are times when you want things to be your baby. Okay, we do things for big picture, legacy, good of the city. But, and again, it's that disadvantage I talked about that a mayor only has 2 years. Council members have, particularly new council members, have the luxury of getting their feet on the ground and firmly planted for a year, and then really 3 years to really know what they're doing and getting and moving forward. It's a very rare situation when we have a mayor who has never served before. Not to say it couldn't happen, but it's a rare situation. But even so, my situation, for example, I was plopped down among 5 folks who had already been here and had their way of doing things and were in their groove. I was the new kid, even though I was experienced. So that is a detraction as well. We're allowed to evolve and change in life, and even if I were not the mayor, I am at the point where I believe that in a city of this size and this complexity, and given that all council members have a 4-year term, it puts a mayor on even footing to be the mayor, to act as a mayor in 4 years, rather than a term that's abbreviated in relation to all of their colleagues. Did I answer your question? I recall that when this committee first discussed and moved forward the question of a 4-year term for mayor, there was some discussion about putting it off to 23 or 25 or whatever it may have been. And I remember the discussion that more than one of you had, well, if it's important to do now rather than later. And I think what we did, as I recall, we voted on the concept and then voted on the implementation date. And that's where that discussion came in as to, is it worth delaying? Should we do that to a mayor? Is it important enough to put it out there now?
Thank you, Mayor. That gives me a better perspective of what a sitting mayor has to go through when they're considering 2 versus 4. So to all of my colleagues that are here, anything that you want to bring forth, give us a concise, explanation of why you think something should be here so that we could properly understand your position. And then if we've got the documentation or any support before us, it helps us, vote that same day, or if we need additional time, we take additional time. But I like those short, concise answers with support. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's nothing further, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn with a second. All in favor? None opposed. Thank you all. See you next week at 5:30. Same day, same time.
Thank you.
I know.
Thanks for using WebEx. Visit our website at www.
What's wrong with John? Can't come if you can't talk.